The lights went out in a private room at the back of the party. A heavy sigh broke the darkness, and before he could even scream, a stranger's mouth found his. Milo Hale had only wanted a corner to cry in after the boy he loved rejected him in front of the whole floor. Instead, he walked out with someone else's kiss burning on his lips and a scandal already spreading like wildfire across campus. By morning, the most dangerous name in school was being dragged through the mud, and everyone was hunting for the mystery boy who dared to kiss him. Whose lips were those, really? And why did the campus's untouchable alpha refuse to ever let him go after that? Pull up a chair, because this is the story of Milo Hale, the boy whose confession went so wrong it accidentally landed him a boyfriend the entire school was terrified of. If you have ever had a crush blow up in your face at the worst possible moment, in front of the worst possible audience, tell us about it in the comments below. The first night of junior year, our whole floor decided we needed a party to ring in the new semester. Someone dragged a speaker into the common room, someone else raided the vending machine for snacks, and by 10 o'clock half the dorm was crammed into room 214 pretending the cheap seltzer was champagne. I'd been rehearsing my speech for 3 weeks. Not out loud, God no, but in the shower, on the bus, staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning. Tonight was the night I told Julian Cho how I felt. 2 years of just friends was long enough. I took a breath so deep it practically qualified as a life event, squared my shoulders, and opened my mouth. That's when Nate, some guy from the 3rd floor I barely knew, shoved past me, dropped to one knee in the middle of the room like we were in a rom-com, and announced to the entire party that he was in love with Julian Cho. The room went dead silent. My rehearsed speech evaporated somewhere between my lungs and my throat. Julian didn't blink. He set down his cup, looked Nate dead in the eye, and said, with the emotional range of a man declining a timeshare, "I'm flattered, but no." Nate, to his credit, took it like a champ and slunk back into the crowd. I figured that was the end of it. My window to confess had just been publicly incinerated by a stranger, and honestly, I was almost relieved. Almost. Then Julian turned, not toward Nate, toward me. "Milo," he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "sorry. I've only ever thought of you like a brother." I froze, actually chemically froze, like my blood had been swapped for liquid nitrogen. Around me, the room went from awkward silence to a different, worse kind of silence. The kind where 20 people realize they've just watched something they weren't supposed to see. Here's the thing that made it so humiliating. Julian wasn't wrong to guess. We held hands under desks during finals week. He remembered my coffee order down to the number of pumps of syrup. He texted me on our friendship anniversary, an actual date he'd invented, and got genuinely upset if I didn't get him something for his birthday. If that's what just a brother looked like, I had some serious concerns about his family. But hearing it announced to a room full of people, before I'd even said a word, that stung in a way I wasn't prepared for. I mumbled something about needing air and bolted for the nearest door, which happened to be a private karaoke room someone had booked and abandoned. I slammed it shut behind me, killed the lights, folded myself into the corner behind a couch, and cried like the world was ending. Because in the extremely specific, extremely dramatic way that only 19-year-olds can feel things, it was. I wasn't even crying about the rejection, not really. I was crying because some tiny pathetic part of me had hoped that if I ever got him alone, he might actually kiss me, just once. That's all I'd wanted. A single data point to prove I hadn't imagined the whole thing. A few minutes into my private meltdown, a long, exhausted sigh drifted down from somewhere above me in the dark. I about had a heart attack. I hadn't realized anyone else was in the room. I scrambled for the light switch, hands sweeping blindly across the wall, and before I found it, someone caught my wrist. The next thing I knew, a mouth was on mine. It wasn't gentle. It was fast and certain, and it tasted like fruit liqueur and something sweeter underneath. I sat there stunned for a solid 2 seconds, long enough for my brain to fully short-circuit, and then instinct took over and I swung. My palm connected with a face so hard the sound alone made me wince. "What the hell?" growled a voice, low and rough. "Kiss someone and get slapped for it. Are you unwell?" "You're the one who's unwell," I shouted back, scrambling for the switch again. This time I found it. The light snapped on. 4 eyes met across the room, and my stomach dropped straight through the floor. Standing in front of me, nursing a cheek that now bore 5 perfect red fingerprints, was Knox Sterling, the Knox Sterling, The guy every underclassman whispered about like he was an urban legend. I swallowed hard, all my righteous fury draining out of me in an instant. "The hell are you?" he demanded, glaring. "And why do you look like someone just kicked your dog?" I said nothing. I stared at the floor and prayed for the earth to swallow me whole. The door banged open. Two guys with bleached hair poked their heads in. "Knox, man, who's this one? Why's she? Sorry he crying?" Knox shot them a look sharp enough to draw blood. "If you've got nothing useful to say, shut up." They shut up instantly. I need to use the bathroom," I stammered, already halfway to the door. "Go," Knox said, waving a hand like he was swatting a fly. I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted and ran directly into Julian, who was standing right outside. His face went dark the second he saw me. He turned on his heel without a word. I chased after him like an idiot. When Julian finally stopped and turned around, his voice was cold enough to frost the hallway. "Milo, I turned you down." "That doesn't mean you get to throw yourself at that crowd out of spite." "I didn't throw myself at anyone," I said, bewildered. "Your mouth says one thing, your lips say another." He nodded pointedly at my face. I froze, then remembered. I'd put on bold red lip tint before the party, the kind that doesn't budge for anything short of acetone. "He kissed me," I said, voice cracking. I didn't even see it coming. I yanked a wad of tissues from my bag and started scrubbing at my mouth like my life depended on it. "So it's my fault for existing near you, is that it?" First it's short skirts asking for trouble, now it's smart guys assuming they know what what guys, actually want just because someone got flirty at a party once. His mouth twisted. "I genuinely don't know what I ever saw in you." That one landed harder than the rejection had. I felt my eyes go hot again. Julian's expression softened, just slightly, the way it always did whenever I looked like I was about to cry. The one weakness I'd always been able to exploit, back when I still thought we had something. It struck me, even through the hurt, that a boy who only ever thought of me like a brother didn't usually sound this rattled about someone else kissing me. I didn't say that out loud. It felt like a fight neither of us was ready to have. "Just stay away from that crowd," he said, quieter now. "Smoking, fighting, whatever else they get up to, none of it ends well. You don't want to ruin your life over people like that." "Okay," I said, throat tight. He turned to head back inside, then paused. "Get that lipstick off before you come back in," easier said than done. The stuff was basically industrial grade. I was on my 15th tissue, cheeks still stubbornly red, when a group of guys passed by. The tallest one stopped mid-stride, backtracked, and planted himself directly in front of me. "It was one kiss," Knox said, arms crossed, watching me scrub my own face raw. "You're acting like you got mugged." I flinched and looked up, straight into a pair of eyes that were, annoyingly, still lit up with amusement. "Don't be scared, little one of the bleached hair guys said, clearly trying to smooth things over. "Knox just had a few too many. He gets handsy." "No hard feelings, yeah? He gets a free kiss and now he's playing the victim?" the other one added. "Cold, man. Let's go, the first one said quickly, seeing my expression, and started physically dragging Knox away by the shoulder. Knox shot him a look and he let go immediately, hands raised in surrender. "And this?" Knox said, jabbing a finger at his own cheek, still faintly red from my slap. "What are we doing about this? You started it," I snapped, some backbone finally returning. "If you hadn't grabbed me in the dark, I never would have hit you." He laughed, a short, sharp sound that somehow made the hair on my arms stand up. "Then I suppose I owe you another kiss. Fair's fair, you can slap the other cheek to match." I shot upright like I'd been electrocuted. This man had clearly escaped from a psych ward. "Excuse me?" He raised an eyebrow. "What, scared?" "Never," I said, on pure reflex, immediately regretting it. "I don't back down from anyone." "Good," he said, tilting his head, smile turning sly. "Because if you don't let me even the score, I'll just have to keep bothering you until you do. And trust me, you don't want that." I'd heard about Knox Sterling's reputation. Once he decided to fixate on someone, their life became a living hell until he got bored. Better to take the hit now and be done with it. "Fine, one kiss, and then you swear to leave me alone. Deal?" He nodded, magnanimous, like he was granting me a favor. I squeezed my eyes shut, face scrunched like I'd bitten a lemon, and waited. 1 second, 5 seconds, 30 seconds. Nothing. I cracked one eye open. The hallway was empty. Knox and his entourage had vanished into thin air, apparently, while I was busy bracing for impact. Great. So it had all just been a joke at my expense. By the next morning, the campus forums were on fire. Breaking campus legend: Knox Sterling got dumped. Some anonymous post claimed Sebastian Cole, Knox's on and off boyfriend of the last year, notorious across 3 campuses for his temper, had dared Knox to kiss a total stranger as a party game. Knox had refused. Furious, Sebastian had stormed off. And then, in what the Post called the plot twist of the semester, Knox had turned around and kissed someone else entirely, right after Sebastian left. Sebastian found out within the hour and ended things on the spot. Now half the student body was on a manhunt for the mystery kiss, and the other half was terrified for whoever it turned out to be. Nobody wanted Sebastian Cole's attention, especially not this kind. None of it matched what I'd actually seen. I hadn't caught so much as a glimpse of Sebastian in that dark room. No dare, no audience, nothing but a sigh in the dark and a kiss I hadn't asked for. Campus gossip, I was learning fast, cared a lot more about a good story than an accurate one. I was hunched over my laptop in the study lounge when I overheard 2 guys from my floor gossiping about it a table over. My pen slipped clean out of my hand. "That sounds like it could literally be me," I blurted before I could stop myself. "Sebastian Cole? He doesn't seem that scary," someone said. "Scary is an understatement. You know that guy who sent Knox a love letter last spring? Sebastian cornered him in the locker room and hosed him down with the shower for 2 straight hours." I felt every hair on my body stand at attention. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. Julian had sent a screenshot, a viral post titled "Taking Out the Trash, Campus Cleanup Initiative." Underneath it, his message read, "Look at the kind of people you're mixed up with now." I typed back with shaking hands, "If Sebastian comes after me, will you have my back? You made this mess, you clean it up." My stomach turned to ice. Was Julian just scared of Sebastian's reputation, or did he just not care what happened to me anymore? I spent a solid hour composing and deleting 6 different replies to Julian, each one somehow more pathetic than the last, before giving up entirely and hurling my phone face down onto the bed. Theo, walking past my open door, took one look at my face and simply said, "Don't," before continuing on to the shared kitchen, which was, honestly, fair. Either way, I was cooked, and the only person who could uncook me was the guy who'd started this whole disaster. I marched toward the athletics dorm, with the single-minded determination of a man walking to his own execution. I muttered the entire way there that I was probably about to get eaten alive, walking into that room voluntarily. And then, because the universe apparently has a sense of humor, I did not expect to walk in on Knox in his room wearing, and I cannot stress this enough, absolutely nothing but a pair of boxers. I short-circuited. There was nowhere safe to look. Look at the parts he wasn't wearing clothes on. Mortifying. Look at the parts he was. Somehow worse. "You having some kind of seizure?" His voice snapped me back to earth. "See, can you put a shirt on before we talk?" "Who are you to be giving me orders?" He smirked. "Normally, I couldn't care less if you clocked me shirtless or not, but I've got somewhere to be. Make it quick." I gritted my teeth and forced myself to meet his eyes. "I'm the guy whose first kiss you stole last night." "Don't remember," he said and yawned. I nearly fell over. He'd genuinely forgotten. Was I really that forgettable, or did he just kiss so many people that they all blurred together? I made myself keep staring at his face and only his face, and had to grudgingly admit, infuriatingly, that he was gorgeous. Sharp jaw, unfairly nice mouth, the kind of face that made my brain replay last night's kiss against my will, my first kiss. Gone, apparently, without a trace from his memory. My face went hot. Knox's mouth curved into something wicked, clearly assuming I was blushing over him. I took a breath and launched into my rehearsed pitch. "Last night, private room, 2nd floor, you kissed me. If you don't remember my face, maybe you'll remember I slapped you afterward, hard enough to leave a mark." Knox let out a long, slow "oh" like a jukebox winding up, and then his expression went ice cold. "And? I heard you got dumped over it. Could you tell Sebastian it was a misunderstanding? That nothing happened between us? Why do I owe you an explanation about my own life?" His eyes went flat, contemptuous, like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. "Because he thinks I'm some kind of homewrecker. He's threatening to put me on a list of people who need to be dealt with, not my problem." "Please," I said, voice shrinking. "I'm scared of him." He laughed under his breath. "So do something about it." I nodded like a bobblehead. "So, will you help me just this once?" "No. Short. Final." He stepped back to shut the door. I panicked and grabbed it, and 3 more guys inside all turned to stare at me. fresh off swim practice, apparently, because every last one of them was in exactly the same state of undress as Knox, towels draped over chairbacks, duffel bags dumped by the door. My face caught fire. I didn't know whether to look at the floor or the ceiling. "Clothes! On! Now!" Knox bellowed at them, and there was a mad scramble of fabric behind him. "You trying to spend the night?" he asked me deadpan. "No, I just need you to help me, please." "I only help people who belong to me," he said, voice dropping into something lower, more deliberate. My mouth outran my brain, as usual. "How do I qualify, then? Is there an application process?" His eyes dragged slowly down my body like he was pricing livestock. "Feed me and we'll talk." "Feed you what?" He tipped his head toward the room behind him, smirks widening. "Come in, I'll teach you slowly." Every red flag in my body waved at once. Opportunity of a lifetime, sure, the kind of opportunity that ends with you as a cautionary tale. "You know what? Never mind. Nice talking to you." I hiked up the hem of my jacket and actually ran, one shoe flapping loose behind me, hair streaming in the wind. Laughter chased me down the hallway like something out of a sitcom. Terrified of Sebastian's retaliation, I glued myself to my roommates, Theo and Sam, for the next week. We moved everywhere in a pack, like nervous ducklings. Then one afternoon, Julian did something he almost never did. He actively sought me out, waiting until Theo and Sam had drifted off ahead so it was just the two of us. "Come with me to see Sebastian," he said. "Why would I want to do that?" "I like him." He said it so plainly it took me a second to process. "He's been looking for you. Help me get a foot in the door, talk to him with me, and afterward I can smooth things over so he leaves you alone. So I'm bait, not bait. Just a reason to start a conversation. I'll make sure he doesn't touch you." "And what makes you so sure of that? You two dating or something?" I stared at him like he'd sprouted a second head. "I won't back out," Julian said, ignoring the question entirely. "We're in the same year. Don't sell me out, at least." I turned to leave, done with this conversation, when he murmured, almost too quiet to catch. "Too late." I stopped, followed his gaze, and there was Sebastian, striding toward us in dark red boots that clicked against the pavement like a countdown, moving like a rose bush that had learned to walk, beautiful and armed with thorns. I had never been in a physical fight in my life, and had zero interest in starting my streak now. "You're the worst," I hissed at Julian, scanning desperately for any possible exit. That's when I spotted Knox across the quad, shooting hoops with his crew, and a genuinely terrible idea sparked in my head. If I was going down anyway, I might as well drag the actual instigator into it. I sprinted over, completely out of breath by the time I reached him. "Knox, please, just tell Sebastian the truth. He's right over there, waiting for me." Knox glanced once at Sebastian, expression unreadable, and said, "Get away from me," before turning back to the game like I hadn't spoken at all. I stood frozen, humiliation stacking on humiliation, rejected by Julian, kissed and forgotten by a stranger, and now publicly dismissed by the one person who could actually fix this. My eyes started stinging again, and this time I couldn't stop it. One of Knox's friends, catching sight of my face, elbowed him. "Man, do something, she's sorry, he's..." About to cry. Every time we see him, he's on the verge of tears. "Not my fault he cries so much," Knox snapped, hurling the basketball down hard enough to leave a dent in the asphalt. I lost it completely, sobbing in front of God and the entire intramural basketball court. "Enough," Knox barked. "One more tear, and I swear I'll give you something real to cry about." "Please," I hiccuped. "Just say one sentence to Sebastian. That's all I'm asking." "One sentence? You think that's small? I already told you, I only help people who are mine." "What? You think I've got nothing better to do than run interference for every stranger who cries at me?" His friends jumped in immediately, delighted. "Might as well just make him your boyfriend. With Knox backing you, nobody on this campus would dare mess with you." "I don't want to be eaten alive," I blurted, the exact same line I'd muttered to myself outside his door the day before, slipping out loud this time by pure accident. The whole group howled with laughter. Knox's face went thunderous. "Who the hell would want a scrawny thing like you?" he snapped, mortified. "Then it's settled," I said, something reckless taking over. "I'll be your boyfriend." I have genuinely no idea what possessed me to say it. Some combination of desperation, spite, and the fact that being claimed by campus royalty sounded significantly safer than being dunked in a toilet by his violent ex. Knox went still for a long 3 seconds, visibly biting back something unprintable, before letting out a heavy sigh. "I'm not a good person. You'd be better off staying away from me. I already knew that. But with him as a shield, I might actually survive the semester. Something wild and unfamiliar in me, something I couldn't fully explain even to myself, reached out and grabbed his hand. "Let's date," I said. He stared at me, and I stared right back, chin up, refusing to blink first. Then he smirked, pried my hand off, and stepped back. "Cute of you to think you've got the nerve. Not my type." I looked at him a second longer. If I was being completely honest with myself, his type was, aggravatingly, exactly my type. Tall, sharp-jawed, dangerous in a way that should have set off every alarm bell I owned. In for a penny. "Bend down a little," as I said. He hesitated, then did. I sucked in a breath, pushed up onto my toes, looped my arms around his neck, and kissed him. Right on the mouth, in front of his entire crew, in broad daylight. "There," I said, pulling back. "Enough nerve for you." His eyes lit up like something had caught fire behind them. He studied me for a long moment, mouth curling. "Not quite." I gritted my teeth, went up on my toes again, caught his bottom lip between mine, and not knowing what else to do, gave it a light bite. Knox made a sound I'd never heard from him before, breath hitching, and pushed me back gently by the shoulders. "Not into it?" I said, deflating instantly. "Fine, whatever, I'm out of moves anyway." I turned to make my escape. He caught my wrist before I got 2 steps. "Where do you think you're going?" he said, and slung an arm around my neck, hauling me off toward the dorms like a duffel bag. Knox's off-campus apartment was, unsurprisingly, nicer than my entire dorm floor combined. I hovered by the door like I might catch something if I stepped further in. "Went all bold kissing me 2 minutes ago," he said, clearly enjoying himself, "and now you can't even walk through a door." My face burned purely from remembering the last 5 minutes of my life. "Impressive," he added, smirking. "Come in and sit. I'm going to shower." The second he vanished into the bathroom, my phone started vibrating like it was having a seizure. I opened it to find our group chat sitting at 99 unread messages. The most recent one had a photo attached, and my stomach dropped when I clicked it. Someone with a very long lens had caught the entire kiss from a distance. It was already circulating campus-wide. Summary of the thread. Milo Hale just landed the biggest catch on campus. Voice messages started stacking up. "Oh my God, my child, send me a screenshot for my lock screen." "Me too, send me one too," someone else shouted, even louder. Terrified Knox would hear, I fumbled to leave the chat. Too late. "Trying to grab some souvenirs?" His voice came from directly behind me. I hadn't even heard the shower shut off. I turned and immediately wished I hadn't. He was still toweling off his hair, and abs, a lot of abs. A trail leading somewhere I aggressively decided not to look at. No wonder half the campus lost their minds over this man's body. I tried, very hard, and failed completely, to keep my eyes above his collarbone. My heart pounded so loud I was half convinced he could hear it. "Go ahead and take a photo if you want," he said, holding out a hand for my phone. "Just don't post it anywhere. Consider it exclusive access." I nearly choked. That line landed with the subtlety of a truck. Knox jerked his chin toward the bathroom. "Come dry my hair." I twirled his hair without meeting his eyes, aggressively focused on the task, until curiosity got the better of me. "Why'd you dye it this color?" It was a striking smoke gray, nothing like his natural dark hair. "Bothers you?" His tone sharpened. "Trying to manage me already?" "Just asking. I'm not trying to manage anything, not like your own dad manages you. If you're into the good, obedient type, you picked the wrong guy," he said cold. "So keep your opinions about my choices to yourself." "Fine by me," I said, forcing a smile. "I won't say a word about anything you do." "Meaning?" "You can do whatever you want." His mouth curled, dangerous. "Whatever I want, huh? You're the one who said it." The hairdryer clicked off. Before I could process the shift in tone, he'd hooked an arm around my waist and pulled me straight down onto his lap. I barely got a syllable out before his mouth found mine again, and this time the air left my lungs entirely. "Idiot," he murmured against my mouth, amused. "You don't even know how to breathe through it. Why do you keep kissing me?" I managed, dazed. "Don't want me to?" I said nothing, which, in Knox Sterling's personal rulebook, apparently meant yes. Trying to play innocent long-term? "I'm not that patient." His jaw tightened, genuinely irritated now. "That's fast, even for me. You'll adjust. I've never done this before," I admitted, voice small. He exhaled slow, and something in his shoulders eased. "Fine, take your time." Then, muttering half to himself, whose bright idea was it to fall for someone this hopelessly naive? That night he took me out with his friends. The first toast went straight to me. Down it, may you two live happily ever after, someone chanted, and a full glass got shoved my direction before I'd even sat down properly. I reached for it, mostly to avoid making a scene, when Knox's hand closed over mine faster than I could track. He grabbed the glass and drained it himself. Doesn't count if Knox drinks it, someone protested. Refill, redo. He's not like the others, Knox said flatly, nodding at me. You want to force someone to drink, force me instead. Oh, look at him, protecting his boyfriend already. His friends crowed, delighted, and immediately started refilling glass after glass, aimed squarely at him now. Under the table, his hand found mine, thumb brushing over my knuckles. He leaned in close enough that his breath tickled my ear. Relax, your boyfriend can hold his liquor. That single sentence sent an actual jolt through my chest, warm and unfamiliar, spreading slow through my whole body like static. I spent the rest of the night only half listening to the conversation around the table, too busy replaying the way he'd said, your boyfriend, like it was a fact already settled, not a joke he was still testing out. Back at the dorm the next day, Theo and Sam ambushed me the second I walked in, practically vibrating with second-hand concern. How can you be so calm about this? I finally snapped. Why does everyone act like Knox is just going to use me and toss me aside? Because he goes through boyfriends faster than most people go through socks, Sam said. By senior year, Sebastian was the record holder, a full year, and even he had to fight for it, and Sebastian couldn't even hold on to him, Theo added. You're sweet, Milo, but you're also a whole year behind Knox academically. He graduates before you even finish your degree. Half the campus is throwing themselves at him. You think he's built to resist all that? Not saying don't date him, Sam said, softer now. Just don't get eaten alive too fast. Save some of yourself. Every word landed like a stone dropping into still water. I sat in silence for a long moment, then pulled out my phone to text Knox, and hit a wall so absurd it was almost funny. I didn't have his number, or any way to reach him whatsoever. In the chaos of the last 48 hours, we had somehow never actually exchanged contact information. I was apparently dating someone I had no way of contacting. A full week passed. I didn't reach out. He didn't either. He'd simply evaporated, like the whole thing had been a bit he got bored of. This was never real, I told myself, over and over, until I half believed it. Whatever he was doing, it was a performance. I was the only one taking it seriously. I replayed the whole thing obsessively. The party, the dark room, the basketball court, the kiss I'd thrown at him in front of his entire crew like a dare I couldn't take back. Maybe that was all it had ever been to him. A dare. A funny story he'd tell later, about the desperate underclassman who begged his way into a fake relationship just to dodge one angry ex. The more I turned it over, the more convincing that version got, and the worse it made me feel about how much I'd apparently let myself hope in the meantime. I deleted 3 different drafts of a text I never sent him, mostly because I had nowhere to send them. Late one night, leaving the library, I nearly walked straight into Julian. Milo. We used to be close. Don't act like a stranger now. Still stinging from being used as bait, I brushed past him without a word. He grabbed my wrist. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I don't want to hear it. We were mid-tug-of-war when a voice, cold as a January morning, cut down from above us. Tired of living? Making a move on my boyfriend in the middle of the quad? I looked up. Knox stood there, jaw set, eyes practically firing lasers in my direction. He looked worse for wear, thinner, a shadow of stubble along his jaw, somehow both wrecked and more dangerous than I'd ever seen him. All the resentment I'd stockpiled over the silent week caught fire at once. What business is that of yours? I snapped. We broke up, he went rigid. Excuse me? You're the one who ghosted for a week straight and now you want to play jealous boyfriend? He was quiet for a beat, then turned on his heel and stormed off without a single word. Something in my chest cracked, sharp and sudden, and every ounce of pent-up hurt from the last 7 days surged up my throat at once. Julian, I said, voice shaking, breaking up with him is a good thing. I told you from the start he wasn't worth it. And you, if you didn't want me, fine, that's your right. But dragging me into your mess with Sebastian just to get closer to him? I've never hated anyone as much as I hate you right now. Get away from me, I shouted, yanking my wrist free. You hate me that much? His mouth pressed in thin line. Fine. Compared to Knox, I'll admit you should hate me more. I'll stay away. He finally let go. I didn't look back, didn't rub my wrist, just walked straight for the dorms with as much dignity as I had left, which was not much. I hadn't made it past the little wooded path behind the science building when a shadow lunged out of the dark and pinned me against a tree. "Where exactly?" Knox growled, eyes glowing like a wolf that hadn't eaten in a week. "Did you get the nerve to play me like that? You're the one who played me first." I shot back, refusing to shrink from him. He barked out a laugh, incredulous. "Played you where, exactly?" "I say we're dating, and then I vanish and treat the whole thing like a joke?" Where's my fault in this? I had my phone confiscated for a national tournament. The second I landed, I came straight here looking for you. And you? Getting cozy with someone else, then loudly announcing we're broken up. 8 days of silence, and you already decided I'd dumped you? Could you maybe not be an idiot for 2 minutes? His voice cracked with something raw underneath the anger. I had to hand my phone in. I didn't get the chance to tell you. I looked up, searching his face for any trace of a lie, and found none. "So, we're not broken up? Obviously not." "Then when do we break up?" The words slipped out before I could catch them, some self-sabotaging reflex kicking in. Deep down, we're probably not even compatible anyway. Knox exhaled hard through his nose. "This mouth of yours needs serious discipline." He tipped my chin up and kissed me. Not gently this time, something rougher, almost punishing, more intense than anything before it. He only eased off once he'd apparently made his point, slow and thorough, until my knees actually gave out and I had to grab his neck just to stay upright. "Want more?" he asked, voice wrecked. I shook my head so fast it was basically a blur. "And that guy earlier?" His eyes narrowed. "Nothing happened, I swear. If anyone gives again, you tell me. I'll handle it. You'll protect me? Obviously." "And you," he added, tone dropping into something possessive, "don't go getting cozy with anyone else. Or else what? Or else both of them end up wishing they were never born." I decided wisely not to push that particular thread any further. From that night on, we finally exchanged numbers like normal people, and we were basically inseparable, texting constantly, meeting between classes. Sebastian Cole faded almost entirely from my radar, a distant, mostly forgotten threat. I should have known better than to relax. A few days after the reunion outside the library, right as things between Knox and me had finally started to feel steady, Sebastian cornered me with 4 of his friends in the basement bathroom of the science building. I only got out help, into my phone before he snatched it and killed the call. A second later, Knox called back. Sebastian hit decline without a flicker of hesitation. "Try anything," I said, forcing steel into my voice. "And I'm reporting you to the dean." "Report with what evidence?" Sebastian said, smug. "Cameras in the hallway, sure. Not in here. I hadn't managed to send our location before the call cut out. I tried to buy time. Why do you keep coming after me? Because you're with Knox. You two broke up. You think you're going to keep him all to yourself? You think he actually likes you?" Sebastian's laugh was brittle. "Everyone on this campus knows I'm the one who dumped him. He's only doing this to get under my skin. I was going to let it go in a week or two, until you decided to actually catch feelings and steal my spot. Congratulations. Tonight, I'm going to help you see clearly." He snapped his fingers. 2 of his friends pinned my arms against the wall. 2 more hauled a bucket and dumped ice water straight over my head. I opened my mouth to scream and swallowed a lungful of freezing water instead, coughing so hard my whole body convulsed. Bucket after bucket followed, cold enough to feel like being struck. Sebastian stood on the raised tile step above me, arms crossed, watching with a small, satisfied smile. "Wake up a little," he said. "We've got a whole show planned for you tonight." By the time I was too weak to even stand, sagging against the tile like a drowned thing, the door exploded off its hinges. Knox stormed in, eyes blown wide and dark, murder written into every line of his body. He hit Sebastian with a single brutal kick to the stomach. Sebastian folded to the floor, gasping. "Sorry," Knox said, voice cracking as he gathered me up. "I got here too slow." "I'm okay," I managed, barely more than a whisper, teeth chattering too hard to form real words. Sebastian, clutched stomach, tears springing to his eyes. "Knox, you're hitting me over him?" "I warned you already," Knox snapped, turning on the 4 friends who'd held me down. "Everything you just did to him, do it to yourselves. Every single bucket. Nobody leaves until it's done. Anyone touches him again, and I promise you'll wish this had been the good version." He carried me out while his crew filed in behind him to enforce the sentence. Curled into his chest, I could still hear shrieking and splashing behind us as I asked, weakly, "They're really going to dunk each other all night? After what they did to you, that's the mild version." His jaw was still tight with fury. "If the school comes after me for it, I'll deal with it. Aren't you worried?" "They won't touch me," he said. "Half this campus exists because my family funded it." He didn't say much on the walk back, just kept one arm locked tight around me, jaw set, glancing down every few steps like he was checking I hadn't disappeared. I was too wrung out to talk either, teeth still chattering intermittently, but I remember thinking, somewhere under the exhaustion, that I had never in my life felt this safe with anyone, not even before any of this started. He carried me back to his apartment, ran a hot bath, made me drink ginger tea until the shivering stopped, and dried my hair with a patience I hadn't known he possessed. I fell asleep somewhere in the middle of it, exhaustion finally catching up with me. I woke up with my head pillowed on his arm, and had approximately 4 seconds of pure, unfiltered panic before I remembered the night before. I checked under the blanket, discreetly, fully clothed. I nearly sobbed with relief. "Thought I did something to you?" His voice, amused and scratchy with sleep, came from right beside me. I whipped around. He was awake, watching me with an expression far too soft for someone with his reputation. "You were in rough shape last night," he said. I didn't have it in me to try anything. I laughed, sheepish, caught red-handed. Then he leaned closer, voice dropping. Feeling more like it now, though. My eyes went wide. He kissed me, slow hand sliding warm along my waist, and shifted his weight over mine. My whole body went electric. "Is this okay?" he murmured against my ear, voice rough. "No," I said, flushing scarlet, shaking my head hard. He pulled back, eyes dark with restraint. "Then when?" "After we're married," I mumbled, the last part almost too quiet to hear. He went still. Then, slowly, something in his face melted, gentler than I'd ever seen it. He exhaled like he was releasing the whole world. "You're going to be the death of me." "Is that all you wanted me for?" I asked, unable to help myself. He flicked my cheek, unimpressed. "There she goes again, overthinking everything. So why do you even like me?" "Because you're an idiot," he said, and somehow it sounded like a compliment. "You know that when you don't feel secure, it shows all over your face. You're always half-braced for me to leave." I bit my lip, eyes stinging without warning. He studied me for a long moment, voice dropping into something rare and unguarded. "I've never met anyone who cries as much as you. It's infuriating. It makes me want to wrap you in bubble wrap, and also, somehow, makes me want to keep teasing you until you cry again. And then I never actually want to let go." He meant every word. I could hear it. And something in me settled, quiet and certain, for the first time in weeks. 2 days later, I got summoned to the dean's office. A man in an impeccable suit stood waiting for me, and something about the set of his jaw was unmistakably familiar. "I'm Knox's father," he said. I stood ramrod straight, heart hammering, bracing for the classic villain dad speech. "Here's a check, leave my son alone." "I know you're seeing my son," he said instead. "You seem like a good kid, good grades. But I don't think the two of you suit each other. I'd like you to break up with him." He paused, studying me, then, unexpectedly, smiled. "Relax. I'm not here to be cruel. I actually need a favor. Knox used to be brilliant," he continued. "Top of his class, got into this school entirely on his own merit. After his mother passed, he fell apart. Video games, nothing else. If I hadn't kept funding the school, he'd have been expelled years ago. Your family isn't wealthy. If he's serious about a future with you, he needs to be capable of building one. If he can't get his act together, I'll have no choice but to arrange a marriage for him myself. He's already wasted 3 years. This is his last one. Do you think you could help him wake up?" His eyes were sharp but not unkind, almost hopeful. "That might be difficult," I admitted. "He doesn't exactly let people manage him. Stubborn as a mule, that boy," his father said with a rueful laugh. "But this is the last shot the two of you have. I can't watch generations of family effort collapse because of him. If he doesn't shape up, I'll have to lock him into a marriage of convenience. Would you try for me?" There wasn't a trace of condescension in his eyes. If anything, there was something like approval. I knew dating across such different worlds would be hard, but I'd never been the type to surrender before the fight even started. "Yes, I'll try." He can't fail a single class for the rest of the year. He has to earn his degree on his own merit. If he does, I'll give you both my blessing, officially. If he doesn't, I'll need you to walk away. "Yes, sir." Not a word to him about this conversation. "Yes, sir. I'll be waiting for good news." "Yes, sir." I walked out of that office in a daze, replaying every word on the long walk back to my dorm. It should have felt like pressure. A deadline, a condition, a countdown clock hanging over a relationship that was barely 2 months old. Instead, strangely, it felt like being handed something to fight for. I'd spent so much of my life assuming other people's approval was out of reach, that I'd never once considered what it might feel like to have someone's father quietly rooting for me instead of against me. I decided, somewhere around the third flight of stairs, that I wasn't going to let either of us waste this chance. Knox was out on the courts when I found him, golden afternoon light catching every line of him as he moved, all easy arrogance and dangerous grace. I jogged up while he paused for water. "How are your grades this term?" Why ask? Because I already know the answer's failing everything. He said it as casually as ordering coffee, and I nearly choked on air. His friends clapped him on the shoulder as they left. "Knox, talk to your boyfriend, then meet us for the escape room tonight, yeah? Can we skip tonight?" I asked quietly. "What, trying to run my schedule now? Or we could go to the library. Study room works too if you want." "Absolutely not. Fastest no of my life. Then send me your class schedule. Whenever you're free, I'll come study with you." He looked at me like I'd suggested we take up competitive spelunking. I barely have enough time to have fun as it is. Where would I even find time to study? I nearly flipped the table. "Could you take this seriously for 1 second? I genuinely want you to do well." He laughed it off. "I don't need to study. Drop it. Escape room tonight." I felt like I'd been doused in ice water all over again. "I'm not going." His voice went cold. "Milo, are you calling me stupid?" "I'm not, but your actions are saying it loud and clear." I wrapped my arms around his waist, softening my tone. "Knox, if you want me around long term, we should be working on ourselves together, don't you think?" His jaw tightened. "Being together is fine. Studying is where I draw the line. You clearly want a top student. Go find one. I'll step aside." Tears sprang up before I could stop them, and I finally cracked. "Your dad came to see me." Knox went very still. "He said if you fail another class this term, we have to break up." 3 seconds of silence, then a truly impressive string of profanity aimed at his father. "Forget him. Don't listen to a word out of that man's mouth." "He likes you," I said, softer. "Why does that upset you so much? He doesn't get to have opinions about you." His face went dark and shuddered. "If you don't want to study, fine, then I guess you're also fine with us breaking up." "That's not fair," I said, shaking now, voice climbing. "You're not even considering that we have a future together." He went quiet, staring at the ground, jaw working. I watched a few more seconds, felt the pointlessness of it settle over me like a weight, and turned to walk away. He didn't come after me. Somehow that stung worse than anything he could have said. Tears streamed down my face the whole walk back, and I refused, out of pure stubbornness, to wipe them away. We entered a full-blown Cold War after that. Neither of us reached out. He vanished from all our group chats entirely. Then, that night, my phone rang. One of his friends. "Hey, Knox is wasted at the bar. Can you come get him?" I figured it was fate handing me an opening. Breakup or not, this deserved one final conversation, face to face. The bar was chaos, all strobing lights and bass loud enough to rattle my ribs. I pushed through the crowd toward the private room and found him sprawled on the couch, cheeks flushed, clearly several drinks deep. "Boyfriend's here. Everyone clear a seat," someone called out. I hesitated, then sat beside him anyway. A stranger handed me a full glass. First time meeting the boyfriend. Bottoms up, for good luck. Knox stared straight ahead, refusing to even glance my way. Irritated, I lifted the glass to drink it, just to be done with it. Before it touched my lips, he moved faster than I could track, snatching it and draining it himself. "Stealing my drink now?" I snapped. "You can handle that?" His voice was low-edged. The whole room sensed the temperature drop and cleared out one by one, murmuring excuses, until it was just the two of us. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "So what's the actual plan here? Do you actually want to break up?" "I don't. But if you want out, I won't chase you down." I'd spent the last few days doing some hard math on my own feelings. 1. I liked how he looked, unfairly, embarrassingly much. 2. He'd thrown himself between me and danger more than once, and it still made my chest ache thinking about it. 3. For all his reputation, he'd never once pushed me past a boundary, even when it clearly cost him something to stop. But I also refused to become someone who clung to a relationship out of fear. If he didn't want this anymore, I'd let go, cry for a few months, and let time do its work. He looked at me for a long time, then exhaled like he was surrendering an entire war. "Fine. You win. I give up." "Give up on what?" If I don't fail anything this term, do I get a reward? His eyes lit up, mischief flickering back to life. Wait, you're actually agreeing to study? What do you want? He leaned in, mouth curving. I mumbled something too quiet to hear, face heating. He started to lean in for a kiss and I panicked, changing the subject at lightning speed. So, why the sudden change of heart? Scared of you crying, he said simply, and kissed me anyway, loud and deliberate. You're not as tough as you pretend. I'm not fragile, I protested. Sure, just the person who stopped eating right and lost weight, worrying about a breakup that hadn't even happened. You've been keeping tabs on me? I blinked. Asked your roommates. I stared, genuinely stunned that he'd apparently been quietly monitoring my well-being through Theo and Sam this entire time. Sneaky. Effective, though. His voice dropped, suddenly heavier. My dad only cares about money. My mom had postpartum depression. Nobody in the family ever acknowledged it. She held on until I got into college, and then she didn't have a reason to keep fighting anymore. I went very still. I hate him for it, Knox continued, quiet now. He wanted me to succeed, so I did everything I could to fail, just to spite him. I actually thought about ending things with you more than once, but every time I saw you sad, it hurt worse than anything he's ever done to me. Why do you have this much power over me? He flicked my nose, gentle. I swatted his hand away, more emotional than annoyed. I held out my pinky. Then let's make a deal. We study hard, and we love each other well. Deal, he said. But first, I want a taste of that reward you mentioned. A taste of what exactly? He grinned, eyes bright and wicked, and kissed me loud enough that I felt it in my toes. Wait, weren't you supposed to be drunk? I asked, breathless. Faking drunk is the only reason you'd have come running, he said, tapping my forehead. You're not the only one with tricks. From that point on, whenever I had a free period, he'd text demanding I come sit with him while he studied. Whoa, Knox Sterling is actually in the library. Someone whispered as we walked in together, loud enough for half the room to hear. Love really does change a man. Must be nice having a top student for a boyfriend. Under a room's worth of stairs, I slid down in my seat, mortified. Knox just leaned in, smirking, and murmured, Next time, come by yourself, would you? Not a chance, I whispered. You need me here to keep you awake. He kissed me on the cheek right there in front of everyone, then flipped his notebook open like nothing had happened. I wanted to disappear into the floor. He, meanwhile, looked perfectly at ease, settling in to study. The first 2 weeks were rough. He fidgeted through every session like the chair was on fire, accidentally fell asleep on his textbook twice, and once tried to bribe me with dessert to cut a session short. I held firm, mostly out of sheer stubbornness, and slowly, grudgingly, he started actually opening the books instead of just carrying them around as props. By the 3rd week, he'd stopped complaining altogether, which somehow worried me more than the complaining ever had, right up until I caught him quietly finishing a problem set before I'd even arrived. A month into our study sessions, something started nagging at me. Wait a minute. Have you been faking not knowing any of this the whole time? It was suspicious. Every time a professor called on him, he answered flawlessly, like he'd memorized the textbook cover to cover. Knox winked. Caught me. Are you serious? So this entire time I've been panicking over nothing. I smacked his arm, half laughing, half furious. He leaned in, lips brushing my ear. Don't forget the reward you promised me. I went bright red instantly, ears burning. Just like I'd suspected, he didn't fail a single class that term, and by the following one he'd rocketed to the top of his year. His father was so thrilled he came to find me in person. Thank you, he said, and pressed a card into my hand. I waved him off, flustered. Knox snatched it out of his father's hand and pushed it straight into mine. Take it, it's a gift. Don't refuse on my account, his father said. You didn't do this for the money. Still, accepting felt strange. His father just smiled, warm and genuine. Milo, take it. Consider it a gift from your future father-in-law. He said it so lightly, so completely without irony, that it took me a full 3 seconds to register what he'd actually called me, and by the time it landed I was too flustered to do anything but stare at the card in my hand like it might combust. I went instantly, thoroughly scarlet. He offered to take us both out for a proper dinner, but Knox cut in immediately, scowling. Nobody wants to eat with you. Don't crash our date, and pulled me away without another word. I glanced back at his father, who just laughed and waved us off cheerfully. Have fun, you two. We stopped by a corner store on the way home. Knox tossed an armful of snacks and drinks into the basket. At the register, I caught sight of a shelf of small boxes stacked neatly nearby, and thinking about the reward still hanging over our heads, my face went instantly, helplessly tomato red. A minute later, he leaned in and murmured, "Lo, wasn't one kiss enough for you?" My heart nearly jumped straight out of my chest. I speed-walked ahead, cheeks burning, and he trailed behind, laughing quietly to himself. Back at his place, I dug through the shopping bag for snacks and asked, offhand, "You didn't buy anything for yourself?" He looked down at me, eyes full of something unmistakable. "I bought exactly what I wanted." "Fine, keep being cryptic," I muttered, and went back to eating, deliberately not looking at him. Without warning, he pulled 2 plane tickets out from behind his back. Both our names, side by side, destination. A private stretch of coast called Driftwood Cove. "Is this your graduation trip?" I sat up straight, stunned he'd thought to bring me along at all. "Call it your reward, really." He looked at me, unbearably soft, and pressed a gentle kiss to my lips. Somewhere beautiful for something that should be beautiful too. My heart went absolutely haywire, face burning, but knowing how much thought he'd clearly put into this, I couldn't deny it. I was happy, genuinely, stupidly happy, in a way I hadn't let myself be in a long time. I spent the 2 weeks before the trip in a low-grade state of panic that I refused to admit to anyone, least of all myself. Theo caught me refolding the same 3 shirts for the 4th time and just looked at me with the deep, tired pity of a man who has seen too much. "You're allowed to be excited," he said. "You don't have to pretend you're not. I'm not excited. I'm organized." "Sure," Sam said, not looking up from his phone. "Organized people don't Google, 'How long is a flight to the coast?' 6 times in one afternoon." I threw a pillow at him and went back to packing, which is to say, unpacking and repacking the same bag for the 5th time. Knox, for his part, was infuriatingly calm about the whole thing, which somehow made it worse. He showed up at my dorm the morning of the flight, looking like he'd rolled out of bed and directly into a magazine spread, one bag slung over his shoulder, sunglasses pushed up into his hair. "You look like you're about to give a deposition," he said, taking in my white-knuckled grip on my suitcase handle. I look calm. "You look like you're planning your own funeral." He plucked the suitcase handle out of my hand, laced his fingers through mine instead, and towed me toward the car like it was the easiest thing in the world. Something about the casual certainty of it, like there was no version of this trip where we weren't doing it together, hand in hand, no question about it, settled the panic in my chest more than any amount of pillow organizing ever could. The flight was short, the kind where you barely finish a bag of pretzels before the seatbelt sign flicks back on. Knox spent most of it with his head tipped against my shoulder, half asleep, one hand resting loose over mine on the armrest, and I spent most of it staring determinedly out the window so I wouldn't have to examine how much I liked the weight of him there. Driftwood Cove turned out to be exactly what the name promised, a stretch of pale sand tucked behind a headland, waves rolling in slow and unhurried, the whole place smelling like salt and sun-warmed wood. The house his father had booked sat right above the tide line, all glass and weathered gray planks, with a deck that faced directly out over the water. "Your dad has good taste," I admitted, setting my bag down just inside the door. "Don't tell him that. He'll never let me hear the end of it." Knox dropped onto the couch, stretching out like a cat claiming territory, and patted the cushion beside him. "Come here." We spent the first afternoon doing absolutely nothing productive, which felt like its own kind of miracle after a year of exam schedules and tutoring sessions, and a father breathing down both our necks. We walked the shoreline until the sun started sinking low and orange over the water, Knox picking up smooth stones and skipping them across the surf with the same effortless precision he brought to basketball, while I mostly just watched him and tried not to look as fond as I felt. "You're staring," he said without turning around. "I'm supervising." "Sure you are." He caught my hand, pulled me down onto the sand beside him, and for a while neither of us said anything at all. The waves kept time in the background, steady and patient, and I thought, with a kind of quiet astonishment, that I had never once in my life felt this settled next to another person. "Hey," he said eventually low, "you ever regret it? Any of it? The confession that went nowhere, the slap, all of it." I considered the question seriously, the way it deserved. If Julian hadn't turned me down that night, I never would have hidden in that room. And if I hadn't hidden in that room, "You wouldn't have gotten ambushed by a stranger in the dark," he finished, smirking. You make it sound so romantic when you say it like that. It was romantic. I just have a gift for delivery. He bumped his shoulder against mine, and when I laughed, something in his face went soft and unguarded in a way I still wasn't fully used to, even after everything. No, I don't regret any of it. Not one part. Me neither, I said, and meant it completely. That night, after dinner on the deck, and a great deal of teasing about whether I could actually cook the fish he'd insisted on grilling himself, we sat together with our feet in the cooling sand, watching the stars come out one by one over black water. He didn't push. He never had, not really, not once in the entire time I'd known him, no matter how much noise he made about it beforehand. When I finally reached for his hand in the dark and laced our fingers together, it felt less like a decision and more like the natural conclusion of everything that had come before it. The slap, the study sessions, the waterlogged bathroom floor, the pinky promise. All roads, it turned out, had been leading quietly here the entire time. Whatever happens after graduation, I said, watching the tide pull back from the shore and gather itself to come in again. I'm glad it was you. Out of everyone. Knox turned his head to look at me, and for once there was no smirk in it at all, just something steady and open, the kind of look I'd never once caught on his face in public, reserved, it seemed, only for nights like this one. Obviously it was going to be me, he said. You just took a while to catch up. I laughed and shoved him, and he caught my wrist and pulled me in instead, and the rest of the night belonged only to the two of us, the tide, and the very patient, very forgiving dark. Somewhere around midnight, long after the fire pit had burned down to embers, and the last of the takeout containers had been abandoned on the porch railing, Knox nudged me with his foot and asked, out of nowhere, whether I'd ever actually finished writing that confession speech I'd rehearsed for 2 straight weeks back at the start of junior year, the one I never got to give. No, I admitted. Nate ruined it before I got a single word out. Say it now, then. He said it like a dare, arms crossed, eyebrow raised. Every inch the same impossible boy who'd kissed a total stranger in a dark room and then forgotten his face by morning. I considered telling him it was ridiculous, that the moment had passed a long time ago, that whatever I'd planned to say to Julian Cho under fluorescent dorm lighting had nothing to do with 2 people sitting barefoot in the sand 1,000 miles from campus. Instead, I found myself saying it anyway, clumsier than I'd planned, missing half the careful phrasing I'd polished in the shower a year earlier, but true in a way that speech never could have been, because it was finally aimed at the right person. Knox didn't say anything clever back. For once, he just listened, quiet and unguarded, until I ran out of words, and then he kissed me like it was the answer he'd been waiting the whole night to give. I woke up the next morning to sunlight pouring straight through the wall of glass, the sound of gulls somewhere out over the water, and Knox already awake beside me, propped up on one elbow, watching me with an expression far too soft for someone with his reputation. Staring is rude, I mumbled, still half asleep. I'm supervising, he said, throwing my own words back at me, and I laughed before I was even fully conscious, which felt like as good a way as any to start the rest of my life. We stayed at Driftwood Cove 3 more days after that, doing nothing that would have impressed anyone. Long walks, bad attempts at cooking, an embarrassing amount of time spent simply lying on the sand doing absolutely nothing at all. On the last morning, packing up to head back for the semester, Knox caught my hand in the doorway and held on a beat longer than he needed to. Ready? He asked. I looked back at him, at the boy who'd kissed a stranger in the dark and forgotten his face by morning, who'd fought off an entire hallway of bullies without blinking, who'd faked being bad at school out of pure spite, and then quietly turned himself into someone his own father could be proud of, just because I'd asked him to try, and found, for the first time in longer than I could remember, that I actually was. Ready, I said, and meant it. Behind us, the tide came in slow and steady over the sand, erasing every footprint we'd left the night before, and somehow that felt right too, not an ending, just the quiet, unremarkable start of whatever came next. The 2 of us walking into it together, hand in hand, no rehearsed speech required this time. If Milo's chaos hit a little too close to home, we want to hear about it. Drop a comment and tell us the most awkward confession, yours or someone else's, you've ever witnessed, then hit like and subscribe so the next one lands straight in your feed. Thanks for sticking around till the end, truly.